everyone, and welcome to another episode of Marketing Corner.
Woohoo!
Woohoo!
Between two ferns.
Between two ferns. Trying something new.
We're trying something new.
And if you haven't noticed, same haircut, same
I
t-shirt.
was going to say, for this episode, the urge to merge.
The urge to merge.
4 years. 4 years, hubby. 4 years.
4 years in the making. Today's episode 117.
That's right.
And
Still
we're
on season 1.
We'll change that soon.
We'll change that.
Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to be talking about something that confuses the hell out of me and Jen. Mm-hmm. So it might also confuse the hell out of you.
Yep.
And we're talking a little bit about the difference between a CCO, a CRO, and a CMO. Mm-hmm. And who owns go-to-market.
Yeah. And when do you need what?
Yes,
exactly.
And why. And honestly, I get it. It's a little bit confusing. I think it was a little bit more simple back in the day when CROs were not a thing. But here we are. They are a thing. Have been for a while. So yeah, that's what we're talking about today.
Yes.
So let's start at the top here, Jen. Would you be up for trying to define, in your opinion, what each stands for?
I'm going to give it a shot. And
go for it.
Yeah, and this is a question that comes up a lot with our portfolio companies. And honestly, I do struggle to answer it because I have my own personal experience. But the more people I talk to, the more I realize everyone has a different opinion about this. So That's what we do. We talk about on the pod. So CMO for me, hopefully this is the easiest one. Chief Marketing Officer.
Yes.
They look at sort of predominantly the left side of the funnel. So that's your positioning, your messaging, marketing qualified leads, getting those leads to sales. And if you want to look at it from the old school way of the handoff, right?
Yes.
Here's your lead, here's your SQL, here's your MQL.
Yeah. That's the traditional understanding with CMO.
Which
right?
I think should be changing, but we'll talk about that later. So for me, that's a CMO.
Yes.
The CCO, and in this term, I mean Chief Commercial Officer, not Chief Customer.
No, because Chief Customer Officer is simple.
It's a little bit more clear
it's more
of what they do. So when I say CCO, we mean Chief Commercial Officer, and this is someone who looks after the commercial engine. So that would be marketing, sales, and customer success.
Yes.
And then a CRO is Chief Revenue Officer, and they are responsible for revenue generation and acceleration.
Yes.
Which I guess predominantly, again, in the traditional sense, is sales.
Yes.
So you have someone who looks over sales, you have someone who looks over marketing, and then you have someone who goes over the whole commercial engine.
Yes.
What would you say?
I think it's very close. I think if you have to
close.
No, but I agree. I think I look at it like this. So for me, if you look at the most specialized of them, is probably the CMO. It's not that specialized, but if you had to look at it from that perspective, I would
very
go
focused.
The very focused one is the CMO. Then the CCO is less specialized because the CCO, in my opinion, typically owns sales and marketing. It's typically the two areas they own, and then the CRO also owns sales and marketing, but owns the whole revenue engine, which could also be customer success and could be other things, right?
Right.
That's typically what I find to be the case. I also find that it's different, in terms of who they are as a person.
And I think this is where, for me, the breakdown happens.
Yeah.
Right?
Because the CMO is simple. Let's leave that out. That's pretty simple. That's you, a marketeer. One day, hopefully, fingers crossed. Good luck. But the CCO, at least from my perspective, is very typically, and this is also the funny part and why we also bring it up, because technically, in an ideal world, 50% of all CCOs or CROs, for that matter, should come from marketing.
Yes.
Right? That is not the case.
Not at all.
I think in my career, I think I've stumbled upon one maybe CCO who was a marketeer at most.
Yes.
Right? So most of them are sales. Let's just be real.
100%.
And I think CROs, there's a little bit, at least from what I've seen, a little bit more marketing, but it's almost always also sales.
I would say my experience is very similar. I've met in my 10 plus year career in marketing, I met one CCO who had a marketing background.
Yeah.
But I have never met a CRO with a marketing background. It is always salesperson. Yeah. Always been a salesperson.
Exactly. And I also found
sales background, I should say.
Most of the time, if it's not, then I've also found it to be sometimes it could be someone from some strategy people, like management consultants.
Consultancy.
Management consultants, head of strategies that have gone into CRO roles. And sometimes I found it also to be like these revenue operation people could also move into that role.
Yeah.
But predominantly, it's just salespeople.
It tends to be salespeople. And I agree with same. And I think, I don't want to stray too much from what we're talking, but I think that's where marketing often does not get a seat at the table. Unless you have a CMO, which most companies in our sort of startup scale-up space probably aren't at the right stage for CMO. We'll talk about when you do need a CMO. But because we have not really worked in companies necessarily that needed CMOs. We have always been reporting to salespeople or people with a sales background. And that tends to, hashtag not all salespeople, I know, but they tend to see marketing as a service for sales, which is not, it's not. And that's where marketing cannot really shine. And they tend to not get CS at all.
Yeah.
And CCS as a revenue driver when it comes to upsells and retention, they're usually seen as a cost center.
And I think like a CS to some extent, I guess, faces the same problem as you do as a marketeer, right?
Yeah.
Where like they also don't get a seat at the table, right?
Probably less often than marketing.
Probably even less so.
That's why I am the ride or die CS person in this podcast, because the CS team have even less of a seat at the table than marketing, I believe.
Exactly. No, I think we're in the same boat, and but at the same time, also like I do get some of it, right? And I think the part that I do get is that if you're a new, let's say, startup or scale up or whatever, like unless you're not gonna get me to say that marketing is not important, but at the end of the day, what is most important for working? Is it most important that you have a sales, like if you had to choose between one person, is it important that you have a marketeer who brings in marketing stuff, but then you can't close it? Or is it better you have a closer, but there's not coming in a lot of stuff? And I actually would say, and I'm being extremely simplistic about it right now, but just take it with a grain of salt. But I'm just trying to make an example of saying, let me use a perfect example. We have a client, not to be spoken of, that we've helped for a period of time, and they were completely starting from scratch, got a lot amount of funding, so they wanted to roll really fast. We built a shit ton of pipeline for them. Like we've done extremely well. Like they're flooding in pipeline, but it doesn't matter because they have no salespeople that can close it. Like their salespeople's not closing it. They fired their whole sales team. Lots of other stuff. There's a lot of other stuff going on. It's not completely dead. My point is, then all the marketing efforts we've done to create all this pipeline is not wasted, but it's, it's not great. Now, because when you have one salesperson, it's not like they generate zero. They would generate some, it wouldn't be amazing, wouldn't be great, and it's different, but I would argue that like you probably need to make sure you have some sort of sales processing. You can close some stuff. And here a CCO might make more sense than a CMO first.
In that sense, yes, but I'm gonna throw a little
do it.
I'm gonna throw a little wrench in that because
I
think when I was on this side of the desk as an in-house marketer, I would agree with you.
Yeah.
Close those deals.
Yeah.
But now when I work in private equity, it's the customers. It's keeping customers, because we look at CAC and LTV. We want people who stay.
You can't keep a customer you haven't earned yet.
But you're going to have a customer. But the thing is, if you just focus on sales, and we've seen this 100 times, sales-led, they focus on quota.
Yes.
It is not necessarily the ICP. It is not the people who will stay. It's the people who assign. And that's not good for a business either, because you're going to spend a ton of money on salespeople. You're going to have that high CAC. You're going to close them, and then they're going to leave.
Yeah.
So one of the things, so we do, for example, at Verdane, we do an annual marketing survey where we send out a survey to all of our portfolios, and then we benchmark them. And one thing that we're seeing time and time again is that there's huge investment. Like 60 to 80% of all budgets are going into the left side of the bow tie. Marketing, sales.
Yes.
Awareness, closing.
Yeah.
Pennies are going towards keeping customers and expanding them. But that's the area where you're going to get the repeat. So we look at CAR, like contracted annual return revenue.
Yeah.
That recurring revenue, that's super important. So I think the problem, I'm not saying that all you need to do is focus on customers, because you're absolutely right. If you don't have any, you can't. But I think what I would hate to see is that customers get forgotten. And I think we see that a lot. So I think.
Well, would you say like, when does that start becoming a problem? I would also argue if you're starting out and you have a, like how high does your churn have to be for that to be the focus, right? Because like if you have a churn of less than 2%, do you really need to care? Like honestly, like, and I'm not saying we shouldn't care about the customers. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying.
But how do you get a 2% churn rate?
Well, I've seen a lot of cases. It's because like a lot of, especially enterprise-led sales, right? Like enterprise-led sales when they're like super, because they sign contracts for 5 years, right?
But they'll sign knowing that they're going to be taken care of. There's no enterprise client who's going to sign and be like, I'm on my own. They're going to expect a call, a number, a dedicated person, right? So no enterprise person is going to sign that $20,000, $50,000 contract unless they have a guaranteed great customer support.
Yeah.
And so again, for us, a red flag is like 20% churn.
Yeah,
huge red flag,
huge red
right?
flag. Yeah,
but what we also want to see is negative churn, which is that your expansion is higher than your churn rate.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get that with sales.
But do you
and
see
you're
that
not gonna
often?
That's what we like, right?
Yeah.
And that's and that's what we like to
let's
see.
be real, like a
I will
VC
say
or
every company I've worked at has had negative churn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really?
Yep, because
Wow.
we are better
Okay.
at expansion. But that's because we've always had shit hot CS people.
Okay.
But from a private equity perspective, like that's the thing that we really want to look at. Like, how long do customers stay with you? How likely are they to expand?
But I think there's also other elements to it. I don't disagree, but it's also like when you do enterprise sales, there's quite a lot of lock-in, right? Like you lock in for a long period, and of course there's a lot of expectations, but it's also the shifting cost. Like let's say they want to shift from the whatever tool it is they bought. When I used to work at Templify, like getting out of Templify or getting to whatever it is competitor. Whew, that's
But why would they leave?
Yeah, but that's my point. Like, let's say for some reason you got to the really unhappy, but just like the transition, you see it when people are stuck in Salesforce, right? Just even though they want to do HubSpot, they want to move to HubSpot or whatever it is, just the thought and idea of moving is just like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
Right?
But is that the kind of customer you want?
No, fuck no. But I'm just saying that does happen, right?
But I think the other thing, to bring it a little bit more back to the topic today, and what we talked about with Jocko in a previous episode, right, is you cannot, when you want to scale that, the way you scale a sales lead is you hire more salespeople.
Yes.
And more salespeople.
And that's
more
problematic in general.
And that is when the CAC goes up and up and up. So I would be actually more inclined to hire someone who can optimize that.
But wouldn't you agree that you get to get back here? So wouldn't you agree that we get a CCO before you get a CMO?
Yes.
Right?
So this is, and I think, let's talk a little bit about when you need what.
Yeah,
'Cause
exactly.
To me, generally speaking, oversimplification.
We
and
love
this
oversimplification.
This is no shade to any of those CCOs out there, but I see a CCO as really great early stage.
Yes.
Like they're pretty good at sales, marketing, and CS. They have a pretty good grasp, but they're not specialists in a particular area. They might have a sales background, but their responsibility is overseeing all three to make sure that they work together.
And typically,
super
like,
important.
and it's totally fine. Nobody's great at everything, right?
Yeah.
Like, I
It's
also think-
impossible to be great at everything. So the CCO is knowledgeable enough of all these functions to keep them working in.
And I think my point with the whole argument, the whole reason I said it is just like it stems from the fact that companies are looking at it saying like, what is the most important? That is sales, or at least from their perspective, right?
Yes.
And then that's why when they hire a CCO, we need someone who's done sales before.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because in early stage, that's
rationale, and I get that.
It's the opportunistic,
Yeah.
right? And there you will have in the beginning an opportunistic phase of like, we just need to get traction, we need to get these customers. But then once you hit that, once you move away from founder-led sales, say,
Yes.
where the founder is the one making the calls because they know the product. Once you start to scale and you get a bit bigger, then I think you have to start optimizing for your ICP. Who are we serving and why? And this always is the problem, is remember ICP, I can pay. You have to move away from that and you have to think about who is our ideal customer, who's going to stay, who's going to expand, who's going to recommend us. And that's where that understanding of how these different parts play is really important.
No, I totally agree.
But I would say that you do hit a stage where CCO doesn't cut it anymore. Where you need someone who understands marketing, who understands sales deeply, and who understands the customer deeply.
And I find that typically the classic is you underinvest in a CMO, like it happens too late, right?
It either happens too early and then...
Or too early or too late.
Yeah.
But it's a classic, right?
And if it happens too early, then people go, well, that didn't work. That was a waste of money, right? And then the CMO role is tainted forever because they're like, we tried it, it didn't work.
But the CMO is like... honestly, it's an expensive role, right? Like, let's say you get a CMO, like a good CMO. What is that? 100K, 120 Danish K at least, right? Something, right? If you get a really good CMO these days, and it's probably more sometimes. Well, it doesn't really make sense to get 100, 120K CMO if you're spending 10K a month on marketing, and you're planning to only spend 10K a month on marketing. Then that's a wrong ratio, right?
Yes.
Like if you can't really back it up with a serious investment. So you, in my opinion, you get a CMO when you're at the point where you have traction, you have proven some things work, like you have stuff that works. You've had a head of marketing, probably a head, not a director, not a VP, but you've had a head of marketing or something that's built some sort of foundation, and now you need to take it to the next level, right?
Yeah.
And you have the budget to support someone who goes in and like big investment in their salary and big investment in whatever it is they want to do.
And I think the thing that people get wrong with a CMO, and I think this is what gives good CMOs a bad name, or the title CMO a bad name, is so many times if you hire them too early, there's not that foundation. Because they should be looking at pipeline. They should be looking at revenue. But a lot of times they're stuck with the positioning and messaging.
Yeah.
And in my humble opinion, you do not need to pay someone 120,000 krona a month to look at messaging and positioning.
Not all the time.
And that's why I think that's often seen as the CMO is a waste of money. We need someone, and this is where I get a little confused, right? Because the title's Chief Revenue Officer implies that they look after revenue. Well, if you have a PLG, marketing is responsible for revenue. If if you have sales are responsible, and if you have expansion, CS are revenue driving functions. So when you have a CRO, when do you have a CCO, a CMO, or a CRO? When do you have all these people? Because sometimes it so overlaps, right?
Let me tell you a story. You're gonna
tell me.
I don't think I've told you this. Maybe I have.
You kept something from me?
I was like,
how dare you?
I've told this story, but I gotta be really careful now. Okay, so
bleep it out to me.
I work together with a company at one point, and then they had a CRO. That CRO had been reporting to a person I know. And that person I know was in charge of marketing.
Okay.
And then that person, so the person I'm talking about was the CRO, right? And then at some point that person got demoted, or like it sounds like it was a demotion. Let's be real, because demoted from CRO to CMO.
It was a demotion, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like they didn't clear it as that, but we were all like, that feels a little bit like step down. Whatever. They didn't flag it like that. However, what that person then said in one of the first calls with the person I know was like, okay, but then that person that I know asked him, I'm trying really hard here, what's your plan for marketing? What's your vision? Well, I don't know yet. I need to come up with that. And that was like a huge, I remember like, what the actual F, right? Because you've been the CRO. You're supposed to have a plan for marketing.
You're supposed to have a plan.
Like, you're supposed to have a vision and plan for marketing. And that just clicked and just made it like, yes, it might on paper be CRO's own marketing, but
But in practice, it's different.
In practice, it's very different, right?
And I think then you see these cases where you have maybe a CRO and a CCO and a CMO, and you're like, well, that's a lot of money.
That's a lot
That's
of money.
A very top-heavy C-level.
Yeah.
If you don't have, and I think the takeaway for me from today's episode is it depends on your GTM.
Yes.
Your GTM, it's not your headcount, like, because there's some rules. It's like if you're under 80, you should be this. I think it should be based on your go-to-market. So if you have one product, one go-to-market motion, say that you just do a sales-led SMB.
Yeah.
No enterprise, no PLG. A CCO should be fine.
Yeah, totally agree.
But if you have multiple products for multiple segments and
revenue streams, right? Multiple
revenue streams, then you need to start, because you'll need a CMO who's going to be able to position those, and then you'll need a CRO who can run the kind of sales and expansion functions.
Yeah.
So I think that's where in my world, it's very rare to have a CCO, CRO, and a CMO. I think you start with a CCO, and then when you become more complex.
Does it even is there any company where it makes sense to have all three? Have you seen that?
I've seen that.
I have seen that too. Now that I think about it, I have actually seen that.
I've seen that only in cases where there's been an acquisition.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
you want to give everyone who was in those other companies, they all need a C-level.
That's
so they're
the
like,
same
you'll
reason
be
the
this
chief visionary officer. Fuck me.
And there's a few, there's, and this isn't to shit on titles, and I know titles are so, especially marketing, we love a
good
bullshit title.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that also in my head, and of course now that I'm in private equity and we're looking at the bow tie and we're looking across the whole go-to-market, I'm not seeing this is what marketing does, this is what sales do. It's not as siloed. The best practice, the people who are really nailing it are not siloed.
No.
So when you have a CMO who's like, this is where my role stops, and you have a CRO who's like, this is where that's not great. You need, and this is where I think the confusion is because if you have a CMO who says, I'm marketing, I'm not touching anything else, then you are kind of reinforcing those silos. So how do you optimize, it's impossible to have someone who can do all of those functions across multiple products and revenue streams. So that's why it's super important to have a really good alignment on your targets. Make sure you have revenue targets, not SQL targets and things like that, because that's when you go.
That's at least the good part about having either a CCO or a CRO is that unifying metrics and agreeing on a common target, it's a lot easier.
Yes.
Like than having a CCO and a CMO, because then they have to butt heads and agree.
Exactly.
Right?
And they have to fight for the credit, right?
Yeah, fight for the credit, fight for the budget, all that stuff, right?
And that's where the silos appear.
Yeah.
And so it's such a delicate balance.
On paper, it should remove friction, and I also found that to be the case, though.
Yeah.
It does remove friction. Doesn't necessarily mean that marketing, but it typically removes the friction by giving more to sales. But
removes friction by
removes
giving
friction,
Lunting what they want.
Here you go. But yeah, to some extent, right?
But I think what we're seeing a lot, and again, what Jocko talked about in the previous episode, you can't just the idea of like, we need to scale, quadruple the sales team. That is
so old school, and I see it
but,
so many times.
Yes, and like now again in the private equity space, when we're looking who we're going to buy and who we're trying to sell, it's not that. We don't look at necessarily your sales numbers. We look at your revenue. We look at your profitability.
It's
we
so
look at your
stupid.
CAC.
It is so stupid.
Yeah.
That part, like I think of like, I don't know how many have I advised now. It's more than 100 companies. Like I think it's probably 150 or something. Anyways, I've advised a lot of companies, and one of the things I've found to be something I've seen maybe 1 out of 5 cases, not more than that, but 1 out of 5 is that they think hiring more salespeople is a solution to their pipeline.
Yeah.
Pipeline issues.
Yeah.
So they just want to hire more salespeople. And it's just like, I keep saying to them, like, I try to say to them, you're idiots, but I see them say it in a nice way. But it's like, if you just look at it a funnel perspective, you should have more investment in the top because it's a filtering mechanism.
Yeah.
And if you want your salespeople to be the one that brings in stuff but also closes it, they can't do it at the same time.
No.
They're probably busy closing if it's a longer sales cycle, especially, right? Like, so when, let's say a quarter ends, like we're in a Q2 now, right? What are salespeople obsessed with right now? Closing their quarter.
Yes.
They're not finding new pipeline because new pipeline can't close this quarter. So they're focused on the ones who are negotiating contracts back and forth. That means they're not generating new pipeline.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the point. So instead, this is hard to show on a podcast, but it's more like almost like a pear shape. Like a pear shape. So you have so little incoming in the top, and then you have a huge like bundle of salespeople. But what you need to look at, like, and maybe you see this from a private equity point as well, but more like what you need to look at is how many opportunities can a salesperson realistically handle through their sales process in a good flow.
Yep.
So like, can you handle? And I think the golden number in sales led is somewhere between 60 and 80.
Okay.
There's fluctuations. It's very dependent on case. But I've seen 60 to 80. And that means if you have less than 60 to 80, you have a pipeline problem. If you have more than 60 to 80 per rep, then you have an AE problem. You have too few AEs. Mm-hmm. That's it. It can be simplified sometimes down to that.
Yeah.
And if you have
your sales process is too complex.
Yes. Yeah. And if you have a pipeline problem, you can either fix it by outbound or inbound, right? Like there's other ways, but essentially boil down to those two. And I feel like that should be super simple to a lot of people, but instead they just go like, we just need more salespeople.
Yeah. The end. Because I literally, one of the companies I worked for, I won't say who, but that was literally the math. That was like they literally did the math. We'll call it sales math, where it was like, okay, we need to quadruple revenue, so we're going to quadruple the salespeople. They're all going to be quota carrying, and it's like you're forgetting about ramp up times. You're forgetting that not all of them are going to hit quota, and some of them are going to go over quota. Like it's such a fallacy, and that's one of the things that sure, we're biased, but I would much rather invest in better quality leads that are going to last, that are going to close quickly.
Yeah.
And also, let's not forget the big elephant in the room is AI. There's so many things that sales can now automate when it comes to nurturing or, catching up and all of these other things. Not everything. We don't want everything to be AI. And I don't fully believe that an AI agent can replace a salesperson, but it can definitely make them more efficient.
Yeah.
It can hopefully move things along. But if you get better quality leads, if you have a smoother sales process, there's other levers you can pull. And if you don't have a marketing background, you are not going to know where those levers are. You are just going to hire more salespeople, and you're going to be biased towards sales. And nothing against salespeople, but that's not always the answer.
But it's just not like and it doesn't. And the thing is, it doesn't work.
No.
Like the reason, one of the arguments I typically hear is that if you're sometimes in what I call a very network dependent industry, where it's very network related, typically banking, finance,
or like Katrina with the designers and the fashion houses.
Like exactly where it's very like everybody knows everybody kind of thing. But if I bring this salesperson, he knows everybody. He knows everybody.
So many times.
And don't get me wrong, like that is the thing. But what they get, and And it annoys me because like what happens is they come in, this salesperson, and they might actually get results in 3 to 6 months because they know a lot of people and they can bring in some immediate pipeline because they have, hey, I can just call Jen and she's going to love my tool. And it's great.
She's a friend of mine. Yeah.
She's a friend of mine. She'll buy the tool, right? And that might actually work, but flat debt after that.
Yes.
Because then they have to go and build real pipeline.
Yeah.
Then they have, like, once they've called their 100 friends who would be interested, then they're like, okay, so what do we do now?
Yeah.
And then, so it's like, and that for me has always been like, this is the cherry on the top, people.
Yeah.
This is the thing when you build an engine that works, that brings in like people who don't know you, right? Who don't. Then when there was coming, this is the great cherry on the top to have a sales rep who also happens to know everybody. Awesome.
Yeah.
But you got to build that flow first. And that's what they go wrong. So they hire these networking people and they see a bit of a, not a huge spike, but they see a spike in the first period.
But think of how
Sometimes,
much
not always
they cost,
even.
right? And again,
It is so expensive.
I am not
the
gonna-
CAC is off the charts. It's not.
I'm not going to name the company, but there was a salesperson who was very embedded in the industry.
Yeah.
And this individual was guaranteed his full commission for his first 6 months of employment, whether he hit his target or not, because he was so like cream of the crop. And not only did he command a high salary and a high commission, but when he traveled first class.
Yeah,
he took taxis where the rest of us had to take, public transport. And, so you just look the CAC and the CAC going up and up and up and up. And you're just like, this guy better deliver. And he didn't. Or maybe, the first 6 months, sure. But then, like you said, everything fell off a cliff and you got let go. And it was like, well, what was that?
What did you imagine?
And you could have imagined that money spent on optimizing the quality of the leads or smoothing out the process or helping the product become better. Like there's so many other levers. So we're straying a little bit, but I think it's so when we talk about these different roles, I think we don't have an answer.
No.
We have this is what they should do, but it depends on your go-to-market and your kind of level of maturity where you hire who, right?
I agree. And I feel like typically what I see is the CCO is the one that happens the first. Like then, and then there's typically, and then they can go two ways. Most of the time, they go to the CMO before they go to the CRO, in my opinion. And CROs are, in my opinion, typically kicks in when you're like, let's say, at least 50 plus, typically 100 plus employees. You're a real scale up. You start to have multiple different streams of revenue and stuff. You don't have multiple different revenue streams when you're 10 people or less than 50 people. You can, but it doesn't happen that frequently, right? And it's the same way where you don't really need a CMO if you're less than 50 people. So CRO and CMO, in my opinion, kicks in later.
Yeah.
And then it's just a matter of pathing and how you choose it. But yeah, I found that like, and this is the hard part, whenever marketing's the more important, like for instance, if you would say like, if you're in a super niche play where it's all network based, yes, is marketing really important? I would say so. But could you convince me that you didn't need a CMO in that space? Potentially. Yeah, probably. I could get that. I can get behind that. But if you're like, let's say you're the next Canva, competing against Canva, do you need a CMO? Fuck yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Like absolutely. Probably the first thing you should get before you get someone else, right?
And also if you're doing like a PLG, a mid-market, and an enterprise,
exactly,
you're going to want someone who can oversee the differentiation, the positioning, the messaging for all of these products, the segmentation, all of that. And you shouldn't expect sales to do that.
The bigger the competition, the bigger the need for a CMO.
Yeah.
In my opinion, right? Because like the more red ocean you're in, and you can also argue that the blue ocean, but it's also, if there's like a blue ocean, then it's more about the winner takes it all mentality. So getting there first. Again, CMO is super important. So maybe I'm contradicting myself, but at least I feel like when there's a need to stand out, even more than like in the normal cases, it's pretty important these days. Then a CMO should be very high on your wish list.
And I would add, again, the complexity of your go-to-market.
Yes.
If you're just running a PLG, and I saw a company not too long ago, they had a PLG, fully PLG, very small team, super small because it was just a PLG, but they were making a 500% return because they had no CAC. They had full PLG. They had no salespeople. They were bringing in a few to kind of do more business to business.
Love it.
But it was beautiful to see because they just had something that worked. They had one marketing person who was really good at spinning it and getting it on the App Store and all that important stuff. But it was beautiful to see because you don't need a CMO.
No.
You have a CEO and a bunch of heads of or VPs that you trust, but it was like less than 50 people making a ton of money. And you look at the lovables, and there's a lot of companies out there who super small, and they tend to be AI led, I will say also. In this new kind of AI world, The AI companies are very good at automating.
Yeah,
they're very good at staying lean,
are.
and they make a lot of money.
They make
and that's what we want to see.
That's speaking of another topic for another day. Profitability per employee. That's the new benchmark. That's the new metric everyone's looking at.
That's an interesting one.
But we'll pick that up another day.
Yeah, it's gonna have to be maybe more of an AI focused episode. But with that in mind, we are getting close to the end. But I want to kind of tie it back. So we're gonna say, who should own growth in 2025? It depends on your competition, depends on the kind of landscape, it depends on the complexity of your go-to-market.
Yes.
But we don't see a world where CCO, CMO, and CRO all exist in one company.
It's rare.
Rare.
You need a really good argument for that to happen.
Unless the C stands for customer.
Yeah.
And then that's a different story.
Yeah,
and that
confusing.
I think maybe when you get to the point where you have a CMO and a CRO, maybe you do need a chief customer officer if you have expansion and things like that. So again, it's not necessarily your headcount that counts. It's the complexity of your product, how much competition there is out there, and all the different things you have to do. We did want to talk another topic. Maybe we have like 3 minutes left, but does that mean the roles need to change? Or is this a new episode?
I think it's a new episode.
Okay. Join us for another episode where we're going to dive into that, because do we still have a chief marketing? Do we still have chief revenue? Or do we call it chief growth? Or I've seen digital officer. I've seen some really interesting titles lately on this new landscape that we operate in.
None of them are great.
We don't have
But we'll pick that up.
Not visionary.
Day. Thanks for tuning in, guys. And hopefully you'll be a CMO one day.
If the role of CMO still exists.
Yeah, always. That's always going to exist.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, love you. Bye.